Hello, friends, and welcome to Sleuth Studies, the Hardy Boys podcast. This is your host, Kyra Drogue, signing on for another episode of exploration, adventure, fun, and, dare I say it, mystery. In today's episode, we'll welcome back special guest Ariel Kleber, continuing the discussion we started in part 1, and dive into a big conversation about book banning, freedom to read, and freedom of information in school and public libraries. Friends, I am so excited to once again be joined by librarian, educator, parent, friend, and all-around incredible human being, Ariel Kleber. Now, this is part 2 of a 2-part episode because, as we have learned and as we continue to learn, Kyra and Ariel can talk about the Hardy Boys and libraries forever. Now, if you haven't had a chance to check out part 1 of this 2-part episode, now is a great time to hit pause, check that out, and come on back. And if you're ready to join us once again to talk all things book banning, freedom to read, and radical libraries, well, you're in the right place. Ariel, hello. Welcome back.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
It is anytime, all the time. We're having such important conversations, and I'm so excited for those conversations to continue and for us to get to talk about book banning and freedom of information and freedom to read and all of the different ways that those are intertwined both with the Hardy Boys series and, you know, libraries and society and all of its glory.
Yes, let's do it.
Amazing. There's lots of conversations, particularly in Alberta, happening you know, at the time of this recording, which I should clarify is not, you know, a week before it's being released, but ongoing at this point about, you know, who makes decisions about what books exist in a library and what books can exist in a library and who has access to take out books in libraries. Like, it was really interesting to me when you mentioned earlier that you know, one of the libraries from your childhood had a rule that you could only take out books that were categorized or classified as children's books up to a certain age. And I'm thinking about the process. So let's say I'm a parent, I'm a concerned citizen, whatever, and I bring in the Tower Treasure, and I'm like, you know what, Ariel, my wonderful librarian friend, I probably wouldn't say that because I'd probably be mad.
No, you're mad.
But I'm gonna be a decent human being, and I'm gonna say, Ariel, my wonderful librarian friend, I don't think kids should be able to read this. You know what? I'm gonna use a better example because I have really strong feelings about this book that will come out eventually. Okay. Here is the Golden Compass. I don't think the Golden Compass is a book for children.
Okay.
If I wanted to challenge the Golden Compass, I'm not going to go challenge the Golden Compass tomorrow, but like for argument's sake, if I felt so strongly that the Golden Compass should not be in libraries, I don't feel this way. I have strong feelings about whether it is a children's book or an adult book, but that is a separate conversation. But if I felt really strongly and I wanted the Golden Compass to be removed from all libraries immediately, what's
your next step?
Well, not necessarily what's my next step,
or
but what's
your
your next step? Like, I have brought this to you and I'm like, I am going to raise a ruckus and I don't know, stand outside the library with signs and be like, the Golden Compass is not for children. It is corrupting children's minds. What are we doing about this? Like, what do you do as a librarian? What does the library system do?
Yeah.
How does that work?
So usually you would have that conversation would start with the library assistants on the floor, and hopefully they would start having a conversation with you, but more likely than not, they're going to come get me, which is fair. That's fair. when that happens, the person who is doing it is coming at them with both barrels.
Oh, yeah.
So it is a great de-escalation technique for them to be like, I'm going to go get someone else.
I'm going to go get my manager.
And so I have had a fair few of these actually over the years. And the next step is that I go out and I listen to them and I say, okay, talk to me. Tell me what it is that you are concerned about. Tell me why you're concerned. Talk to me about it. And I take myself out of it entirely. So like, they're not mad at me. I'm not the thing. They're mad at the thing. And it's a very much like, won't somebody think of the children moment?
Yeah.
And I get that. And then I talk to them about what intellectual freedom actually means.
Okay,
And
so tell us a little bit about intellectual freedom.
yeah.
Like if you were giving your spiel to me, if you were going to be like, in the back of your head, you're like, Kyra, chill the fuck out. It's okay. But you can't say that out loud. So
No,
you're like, all
no.
my friend, let me tell you a little bit about intellectual freedom. What would you tell me?
The too long didn't read is is everybody has a right to access the material that we have here. And just as I have to defend this material, so too does someone, say, in Alabama, need to defend their material there. And so it is very easy to defend something that you believe in. It's really easy for me to defend LGBTQ2A+ material because I believe very strongly that it should be accessible for everybody. It is harder for me to defend conversion therapy material, but I still have to. In my mind, I make it better by saying like this person could want to do, like somebody could want to do research about why it exists. Somebody could want to write a paper strongly opposing it, and they need access and information to help support that. This is part of the research process. It's part of the research process to have a breadth of material with opposing viewpoints accessible to everybody.
Yeah, access to like fact-based information about both sides.
That is what we do. Is we have to look at it as a physical object and not its content. I can come back to because obviously conversion therapy, like there's some true medical misinformation, and we weed. So weeding is like when libraries get rid of intentionally material, but we have very clear and firm guidelines about how we do that. So medical material gets weeded once it's hit 5 years old, because the likelihood that it is now medical misinformation is very high. So if it is disinformation or wrong information, we have the right and the obligation to weed it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't still exist for 5 years sometimes.
Right.
And so it's that like, I have to draw this line that I have difficulty with, because someone in Alabama who maybe thinks that conversion therapy is great and LGBT is not, they still have to hold the LGBT line because I am holding the conversion therapy line, is how I look at it.
Right.
So we have to do this for each other, because the thing that I find easy to defend is not necessarily the thing someone else finds easy to defend, but they still have to defend it, because we still have to defend it.
When you talk about defending it, what does that look like?
Yeah. So that is just kind of the understanding of what intellectual freedom means, of that everybody has access to this information, and that you don't necessarily have the right to tell someone else what they can or can't read. So in a public library space, we are very fortuitous because we have way bigger reins than perhaps a school library,
right,
that has a lot more difficulty with that, and they don't necessarily have the obligation to defend intellectual freedom.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Can we like sideline and talk about that for a second? Because I think there's also a lot of conversation about, I guess, the difference between public libraries and school libraries. And, you know, I'm going to make an assumption here and I could be wrong, but, you know, librarians all approximately receive the same level of training as relates to these topics.
Librarians do. But the staff in school libraries are not librarians. 9 times out of 10. Actually, probably like 49 times out of 50. Most school libraries have been so underfunded or have received such reduction in funding that I know of one teacher librarian in Edmonton I work with who is a librarian by
trade.
By background.
Okay.
Who also has a teaching degree and who teaches at the school where she works, where she is also the librarian. But she is the only one out of the like almost 30 schools that I interact with. And she is the only one out of the entirety of the portion of the city that I work out of. So most school library staff are a kindergarten teacher that's been reassigned because she doesn't have, or he doesn't have, an afternoon class. They don't have an afternoon class. They are now the librarian assigned to the library.
And they're not required to do any like...
They have no training. Or it's
Wow.
a parent volunteer or a series of parent volunteers who, so most people when they think about a school library, and when I say people, I really do mean like school boards and school administrators.
Mm-hmm.
They really do think of the library as a place where like kids go to check out materials, but they don't really think about the thought that goes into developing those collections, changing over those collections, maintaining those collections, weeding those collections. And that is a whole piece where we end up on a slippery slope to bans, because perhaps the collection is out of date, or perhaps the person who is doing selection genuinely didn't know, like they were selecting broadly from a book that was from a vending to K to 12 schools, and they just picked a bunch of graphic novels because they're graphic novels. Like, what could they be about? And like, they're pictures, it's fine. And so like, through no fault of their own, they are potentially picking inappropriate things for a K to 6 school because they're looking through a catalog for K to 12 material. And because there is a categoric misunderstanding of what graphic novels are and what they can be and how serious subject matter can be, and that they're totally appropriate for grade 10 to 12 students, doesn't necessarily mean that they're appropriate for K to 6 students through anyone's lens. Do I think that they should be banned? Of course not. Don't tell me what my child can read. But
so in, I guess, a broader kind of sense then, speaking to like public libraries versus school libraries, who's making decisions about what can and cannot be in those libraries? And at the same time, because I like to make a complicated question for you, who gets to make decisions about what kids can and can't read?
Okay, so
here, let's open this whole can of worms right here.
So we are going to have to come back to the trajectory of a complaint because we haven't quite wrapped
I got very distracted from that.
But so it is different because with schools, they're receiving usually provincial money. So it is government, like it's a government pot.
Right.
But it's also, for libraries specifically, it's often the parent, like the parent teacher association or the PTA or parent fundraising or parent advisory board who is doing the fundraising for school materials usually.
Interesting.
So because that pot of money is owned, quotation marks, by a real invested group of people, and because parents are not inherently with their children at the library in the school when the materials are being selected to be taken home, and that parents are not with the children when they're in the classrooms reading, they have a way smaller margin for tolerance.
Right.
For what can be available. Because in the public library sphere, we receive federal funding, we receive provincial funding, we receive municipal funding, we receive grant and fundraising. We are not beholden to a single body that governs our money. And we're beholden to all of the citizens to whom we serve.
Right.
Not just the parents. And because we presume if you have signed for your child's library card, most libraries, the way it works is that if you've signed for your child's library card, you're responsible. It's not our responsibility what they take out with that card. We don't govern it. We don't watch it. I've had parents get upset with me because I let their child take out Grand Theft Auto on their card. You weren't here. They're here. They have a card. You could be waiting in the car. Like, I'm not.
Well, because that also puts it at a very slippery slope of like what I think is okay for this kid to read versus what you think is okay for this kid to read versus what the next person working in a library thinks that this kid is allowed to take out or
and that's not my
with.
call. I don't get to stop someone taking out material because I feel some way about it. I'm not their parent. I don't get to make that decision. The parent makes that decision. And so for all I know, it's their parent card coming in to pick up their parent hold. Like, that's good enough. Like, I don't care. It's kind of like, I equate it kind of to like the 1950s when you'd send your kid to like pick up a pack of smokes and and some penny candy. Like, it's the same thing. Like, we don't see it as, it's not my call to make how you organize your family and what your family dynamic is with this. So because of that separation and because of that push of responsibility of like, it's your responsibility what your kid is getting up to in here to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Before I have to like intercede. Because the materials, like we presume that you are governing your person's materials. It's part of the same reason why we don't have like an LGBT label on LGBT material. Because we want to, everybody gets the privacy of that. So while a parent could come and say, I want to know what my kid has checked out, and we provide it, we don't have to tell them what it's about.
That's fair.
It's for the parent to find those books, open those books, read those books, make that determination.
Do you find that there are parents that take issue with that?
That it's on them.
Yeah.
I mean, of course. Yeah. There's always parents who don't really want to parent. And that's a whole other slippery slope of thing.
Well, and I mean, I don't know. It's so interesting to me kind of how that whole process. Sorry, my brain is just like trying to comprehend all of this information because there's just, I don't know. People think about libraries as this one specific thing, and there's so much happening at the library at any given moment. Okay.
So should we go back to...
I was going to say, okay. This feels like a natural point to circle back to, okay, I've brought this random book, and I'm like, I don't think that anyone should read this book.
So then the next track is, do you not think that anyone should? Or do you feel that it's been miscategorized and that you feel that it's labeled as a children's or a teen material and it should perhaps be reclassified as an adult material? And then we'll have a conversation about that. And then there's paperwork.
Of course.
If I haven't been able to like de-escalate you and kind of talk you down and be like, let's look at this from...
Just kidding. Everyone should read this book forever.
So then comes like the formal complaint piece. And the formal complaint is a lengthy piece of paperwork that they have to write down like the complaint, the item, why, what's going on, all of the kind of like stuff. And then we forward that. So like the branch forwards it to, in our case, we forward it to our like collections and someone higher. Mm-hmm. So it's usually that like our directors or executive directors who evaluate that. And they get logged. So all of across Canada. You can actually
Oh.
look. Yeah. Yeah, you can see it's available to anyone to access. You can log on to, there's a website that tracks them all across Canada. And
I'm going to find this website and go
Yeah.
down an internet rabbit
it
hole.
is really fascinating for what and why. My most recent one, we had gotten to this point in my most recent one.
Okay.
The item that they found offensive was on display. So we have a lot of displays in my branch. We love doing displays.
Yeah.
And the item was a Governor General Award-winning book of poetry that had I recognized the piece of artwork as a former member of a group of 7 artists. And it's a nude. So it's a woman lying in repose on the cover. It's artwork. It is not, but to her it was pornography. And so she had some very strong feelings about the female form being displayed on a book on a display. And that won't someone think of the children?
So it wasn't even so much about the content of the book. It was just
the cover.
This is something that I saw at my public library that a child may also have seen, and I am, feeling strongly about that on their behalf.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly that. That pornography was being displayed openly at the library. So we did the paperwork and we had the conversation. We had all of those things.
So is that paperwork something that like you will like support them with, work through with it, like, or is that something that you're like?
I hand it to them and I walk away usually.
Okay, that was going to be my question.
Because for us, like I really don't want it to get to that point, but I'm also not going to I'm going to hand it to you, but I'm not going to support you through it because I don't agree with you in any way. But I agree to your right to be able to do it.
Okay.
But you have to do it. If you feel strongly about it, you have to do it. And that might be countervening like lots of customer service etiquette, but that's how I feel about it.
Well, you're like, it's not that you're like, I will not tell you that this form exists unless you specifically ask me for it. Like, no. You're very much in a situation of, okay, you've spoken with me. This isn't an issue that you and I can resolve between each other. Here is the next step. Yeah. You're just also not, holding their hand and going, okay, you need to put your name here, and you need to put that you think that this is pornography here.
Yeah. Okay. And it is a very like, the form is very clear language. It's not intended to like trick or dupe anybody. It's very clear, but they do have to say why it is. Like, why are you getting so upset about this?
Like it asks the hard questions and for good reason.
It does. Yeah. So I collected it. I did my due diligence, which is to like forward it on to the needs that be. But then I'm still left with what do I do? So for me, what I did, because librarians are radical, I built a display. And what I did with this display...
I love you. I built a display are the most like dangerous words that you can say in a library.
Oh my God, it's so dangerous. So what I did was I brought in lots of different books that had art on the covers. Oh. So I brought in Girl with a Pearl Earring because it has a Vermeer on the cover. Yeah. I brought in James Bond, the 1960s pulp covers. I brought in a bunch of different novels. I brought in some Mo Willems because so if you don't know, the pigeon books, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, because they're art. Yeah. And then for some of those covers, including the book in question, which I put on the display, I did an artist's bio. So I included a little bit of information about the artist. I included a little bit of information about the piece that was on the cover of the book. And I included what their last piece of artwork sold for at auction.
Interesting. Okay.
I also included some life drawing books. So like how to draw form, how to draw. So life drawing is usually nudes or draped nudes.
Okay.
So I included those on the display. And it all had the header for art's sake. Because I'm a shit disturber.
This is my favorite kind of shit disturbing.
Yeah. So when I say librarians are radical, this is we love to subvert the idea that like, no, this is art and the human form and the human body and sex acts between consenting adults. There is nothing inherently wrong in these things. And you don't have the right to tell someone else that they can't have it just because you're offended by it. And if you're offended by it, you have to defend why it is you find it so objectionable. But you don't get to say that for everybody. And so that's the problem with book bans, is that it's someone else determining what everybody else gets to participate in or has the option to participate in. And the funny, hilarious thing about book bans is that books will never sell or circulate better than when they've been banned. Like my lovely father happens to be nearby. And so when these book bans happened in Alberta, the first thing he did, because he is a huge advocate that libraries, something to offend everybody. He's a huge advocate of libraries and makes use of them and circulates widely. And so the first thing he did was to go and put holds on the books that were banned. And he was so frustrated because the hold lists were so long because everybody else was feeling the same thing. I want to know what's so wrong about these books. And so like there is no way to shine a bigger torch on a book than to ban it, really, which I find hilarious because as we're talking about Hardy Boys and bans, like there's no bigger way to shine a light on the fact that these books maybe needed to be refreshed or renewed or be printed with a like, when this book was originally printed, these ideas were normalized. Like those types of, there's no bigger like flashlight of like, hey, we should do this thing, or we should read this thing, or we should look at this thing than when they get banned.
And it's interesting to me, like tying it back to the Hardy Boys, because and this is a question that I think is going to kind of work its way through a lot of different conversations that, I'm going to have here, is those original books, because I am, I guess, of the opinion that, books that are written in a specific time don't just reflect the history of that series, but they also reflect the history of that time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I feel really strongly about for these, of these changes that were made to the Hardy Boys books is it wasn't just editing away a piece of Hardy Boys history. It was editing away a piece of history in itself. And it brings me back to this kind of, I will have lots to say on this topic through lots of different conversations. But I guess the point that I want to make now is it brings me to that question that you brought up earlier of, is this still a book for children? Is this still a book that goes in the children's section? Or is this, has this transcended, or, for lack of a better term, has this become a book that was originally in 1927 intended for children, but in a modern day, is this classified as, I assume we don't classify classics. This is a classic book, so it goes in the adult section. Or, is this classified as a book that is intended, like the intended readership is an adult versus the intended readership is a child?
I mean, I think it's a hugely fascinating question because books like Huckleberry Finn that we know are so problematic are still in the children's section.
And is that because no one has asked that question? Like, is that because no one has... Let me rephrase the question. If I was tomorrow to waltz into your library branch and like plop down a perfectly filled out paperwork form being like, I think Huckleberry Finn should be reclassified as an adult book, do you think that would happen?
I think we would take it really seriously, truth be told.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, it is your job to take it seriously.
Yes, it
but
is.
Also, like, what kind of conversation do you think would emerge from that? Like, Ariel, I want you to tell me the future. I'm kidding. I know that you cannot see the future. But, you know, in your professional opinion, what do you think the best, because I know there's no right and wrong answer. What do you think the best answer is in that case?
I think it would be, so thankfully it would not be for me to decide. It would be for the powers way higher than me to decide.
Fair.
But I think it would be some discussion of what have other libraries in Canada done? Where else are these books being housed? Have some of them moved from the children's section to the adult section? And I think a case could be made for it, because reclassification doesn't mean the same thing as removal.
Right.
Reclassification just means that perhaps it's not... Perhaps it requires some type of adult intervention, in that it's something that you're reading together so that you can have a navigated conversation about difficult topics together. Do I think that genuinely happens with a lot of things and a lot of parents and a lot of people? No. And do I really think that I personally would need it reclassified to be able to have that trigger? No. Do I think that my child, once they are able to like fully read on their own, if they came upon a book where the inner, like one of the inner pages said like, this book is a product of its time and its culture, and there are cultural references that are derogatory, inappropriate for current day, do I think that my child would like flag it for me and be like, what does this mean? I totally do. Do I think that as a parent of an independent reader that I would be like, hey, do you want to read this together? Or do you want to read it and then come to me when you have questions?
Right.
Or have discussions afterwards or during it? Or if you read something that upsets you, do you want to come and talk to me about it? Like, feel free that you can. I think that is a way better, like, that's the better solution. But I think that sometimes we want the easy solution,
right?
And so like the other part of this is that what I would look for is that it's got that at the beginning, and then it's got some discussion questions at the back of like how to have that conversation, how to examine, so that even if there's no adult interaction, at the back of the book, there's, why is this problematic? What is different? Why is this no longer acceptable? So that there's some callback to that, to be like, let's frame this. Let's frame this for today.
Yeah, and it's things that as they're reading, these kiddos can, you know, they can, I say kiddo very loose. I refer to my like very much adult brother as kiddo. So kiddo is an all-around term. But it's things for these kiddos to consider, and then I guess they can take that independent step of, oh, this is a conversation that I would like to, you know, bring to the adult parent or guardian in my life.
Yeah.
Or, you know, this is something maybe I'd like to ask a teacher or the librarian at school or the librarian at the local public library. Like,
Whoever
this is a conversation.
adult.
Exactly.
Yes. But I think that is also, like, it brings back a whole other thing, which is your comfortable adult. And as the comfortable adult, are you equipped to have that conversation? Because
right.
It's not a fun conversation to have. I've been having the conversation with because I have a male presenting child, I have had the conversation about consent since he was 2 years old. And so it is not a comfortable conversation to have at any point in the line, but it's still my obligation to have that conversation because I brought them into the world And they did not have a choice in that. They were produced here.
Yeah.
And so I think that becomes like a whole parenting issue of, you've produced this child. You've brought this child into the world. It is on you to have these difficult conversations, because who else is going to have them?
And it's interesting then, because that circle, I almost want to draw a triangle in the air just for fun. The circle of life, that's a triangle. Sorry, that was Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's that, you know, who holds the ultimate responsibility? Because I think in lots of cases, you know, parents think it should be passed off to librarians. Librarians are like, this is not in my job description, friend. Like, it does not say parent your child in my contract. No. And so it's that, like, because I guess the other piece for me is there are no rules. Like, it is not actively written anywhere that, you know, these are the folks that are making the decisions, because there's another factor in this, and that is the publisher. In the case of the Hardy Boys, it was the publisher who went to the book packager and said, hey, you're going to make these changes because we said so, and that's why. And even though it was Harriet Adams at the time at the Stratemeyer Syndicate who was like, I don't think this should happen, because I have to preface this with the reason why she didn't want to make the changes was because she didn't see a need to, because she didn't see any issue with the content in the books. That's its own separate thing. But the publisher went to her and said, you are going to make these changes. And I think the underlying was, or else we will stop publishing these books, like, or else this is done. And as far as I am aware, and I will, you know, clarify this with someone who has more experience in the publishing sphere at some point over the course of this podcast, there are no rules about what that looks like. And we've seen that with changes to, like, books for Roald Dahl. But the interesting thing, the difference there is, in the 1950s, people couldn't hop on Twitter and be like, yo, 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 what is Franklin W. Dixon doing? Those are not my Hardy Boys. Whereas with society as interconnected as it is now, it's so much easier to... I'm scared to say it's so much easier to ask for accountability because I don't know that is actually the case. But it's so much easier to call people out publicly. That's what I'm going to say.
It is much easier to call people out publicly and to point blame.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think you've hit on, like, that's kind of a big issue. And it's easy to point at, I mean, there's a documentary coming out about librarians in America to this very topic, about how it's really easy to scapegoat the people who are defending intellectual freedom and defending freedom of information, rather than going after huge multi-million-dollar organizations who publish the materials in question. Am I saying they should stop publishing? Of course not. But the onus is not on... Like, they have determined what age group they are targeting. We haven't. We just put it where they say it belongs.
Well, yeah, you take the information from the publisher and trusting that is, you know, where it goes.
Yeah. And so I think that's the piece, is that there's always money in it. And money is a weird motivator for a lot of things. And can change people's opinions of things very easily.
Yeah.
When you throw money at a problem, it seems to sometimes...
If only I had money to throw at problems.
Right? Yeah, so because of how libraries are funded, and because they're up against other things that draw money from municipalities, from provinces, from federal government, it's all the same tax pool. So libraries are up against police services and ambulance and fire and garbage trucks and healthcare in general. And so because that pot of money has to be spread around all of us, there's often just not enough to go around.
Oh, well, there's never enough to go around.
There's never enough to go around. But one of the problems with cutting funding or using libraries and librarians as scapegoats for these bigger evils, or like one of the ways in which it's easy to go after libraries and librarians for corrupting children and for all of these problematic motivators, is because we advocate for free access to information. And when you're talking about money, and when you're talking about publishing, and which is not, I am not digging at the publishing industry. I am digging at the very corporate and capitalist society that we currently live in.
I mean, as you should.
As we should. When you're dealing with a capitalist society, what is more subversive in a capitalist society than when something exists for the shared collective for free? And so that it's super problematic, right? Like, why do we want to, we should privatize all of these things. We should monetize all of these things because that's what we should do. Of course, it's not what we should do. Of course, we should have free things. Of course, healthcare should be free. Of course, education should be free. There are so many things that should be free. And when you scapegoat libraries and that knowledge base, what you end up with is a society that no longer thinks critically, is a society where you have newspapers that publish with an average readership of like 3rd or 4th grade comprehension, because we don't really care if people understand the difference between news and fake news. We just want them to be enraged. We want them to feel a certain way. We want to make sure that people don't understand the difference between AI and art. And we aren't concerned about how AI affects art and artists, because we don't really want anybody to be thinking critically about those things, which is super dark and super grim.
I was going to say, we've taken a turn, my friends.
We have taken a turn.
It's a reasonable turn if you think about it, because we talked a lot about what libraries are defending, and freedom of information and freedom to read, and all of these different pieces play into exactly that.
100%. And so when you look at the average, how many books the average Canadian reads in a year, national average puts it at about 17.
I'm sorry, 17 a year?
A year. I would say it's probably closer to 15. How many books did you read this past year, Kyra?
I feel like I'm a bad example, but because I'm bad at tracking them, but I would easily say well over 100.
Yeah. My total this year was 269. Many of them were children's books.
Hey, that still counts.
But it still counts.
Reading is reading.
Because reading is reading, and I was reading aloud to my tiny human in my house. And so when you're reading below that national average, which the American national average is about 5 books per year.
Ouch.
Which really diminishes your critical thinking. You're able to extrapolate details and your comprehension, because reading, as we've talked about, it's work. You gotta really work at what you're understanding and what you're getting out of it. And on average, children who have 100 books at home during their youth, as they are growing up, have 100 books at home, have on average 3 to 4 years more education than their peers who do not have books at home. Now, 100 books doesn't mean 100 books you own. It can mean the constant influx and circulation of borrowed and shared material from the library.
100 books that you have taken out from the library and brought into your life, enjoyed for a period of time, and then returned for the next person to enjoy.
Yes. And it didn't cost you. On average, in Canada, we're looking at, for picture books, we're looking at minimum between $25 and $35 per item.
Picture books are so expensive.
Picture books are so expensive. And so that is a huge financial investment that you are making in your child, in yourself, it gets expensive. Did I pay for all 269 books that I read this year? Of course I didn't.
Queen, you're a librarian. If you didn't take some out from the library, I would be concerned.
Right? The vast majority of those were borrowed materials, were borrowed audiobooks, were borrowed physical books, were borrowed picture books, because my taxes have already paid for these books. I've already paid for them. Why am I going to buy them again? Now, don't get me wrong. I do. I have a library at home. We are sitting in your library at home. They are my book trophies, books that I really enjoyed, or books that I think that I might actually read again, or books that I want to share to have my child have them later, or whatever it may be. I'm not saying... It is a really big fallacy with libraries that people don't still buy books, even though they're avid library users.
Or that, if you use a library, you can't buy books, because why would I buy it if I can also borrow it?
And it's like, no, it's the same thing that I suggest when parents are talking video games. Like, borrow the video game from the library, because there's some video games, realistically, in the 3 weeks you have it out, they are like one and done. You get through it, there's not really a whole lot of replay. But then there's others that there's a ton of replay. So figure out which ones have replay. Don't buy, 50 video games at $80 a pop. Borrow the ones and then figure out which ones are the favorites. Same thing with books. Borrow, figure out which ones are the favorites. Sure, collect the favorites, give the favorites, keep the favorites. But you can borrow so much more, and you have already paid for them. You pay municipal taxes, you pay provincial taxes, you pay federal taxes. That's where we get our money. You've already done it. You may as well make it work for you, and you're giving your child and yourself 3 to 4 years of extra education on top of whatever education you have. And it's not that education is the be all and end all of everything, but it does help to produce a society where people think critically about what they're being told, where people examine truth and what truth means. And I mean, you have countries like Finland who are now making like AI courses and teaching in elementary school the difference between fake news and real news and how to think critically about these things. And it's really, really important. And it's kind of scary that this is where we are headed. And even today we are recording this podcast, but when I was here last, things have shifted even since then.
Yeah.
In AI, in capabilities, in what is happening around the world with news. And so in order to be able to have a better handle on that and to provide that for your children, to provide it for ourselves, I mean, what is more subversive than the Hardy Boys when we're talking about like rebelling against unfair regimes or unfair things, or solving mysteries and putting things together with the clues that you're able to unearth because you can actually extrapolate those clues.
Yeah.
And you can't extrapolate clues if you can't think critically about what you're seeing.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I have so many things that I want to say to this. I feel like there are three like overarching things that I want to highlight that we just talked about. One, libraries are freaking radical, my friends. Like I said, we've said this before. They are one of our last defenses. They are one of our last public spaces. They are so incredibly fundamental to our society. And they're so much more than let's walk into a library, take out a book, take it home. Like it's not necessarily that like easy, like one and done transaction. There's so much more happening at libraries. But also we started this with throwing money at the problem.
Yeah.
But the way that public libraries are funded is in a way, done to ensure that they're always going to continue to be that space where people can go.
I mean, in Alberta, at least, with the Public Libraries Act. But not all places are that lucky.
That's true.
Yeah. And in case you are not familiar with the Alberta Public Libraries Act, it basically stipulates that municipalities are under an obligation to provide a public library if they receive provincial funding. It's
Amazing.
the too long didn't read. And there's like other stuff too, but it basically...
But the highlight is... It is your right to have a library.
And it was important enough to be entrenched in Alberta law, as I think it was the first or second legislature item passed in like 1910.
That's insane.
So we can thank the lovely people in 1910 for being like, you know what's really important? Libraries. You know what's also super important? Access to information.
Well, exactly. And I guess the third thing that I wanted to kind of highlight, the world is changing. It is constantly changing. But libraries are a constant. They are always going to be there. And they're always changing too. They're always keeping up. There's always new information coming in. There's always old information going out. But it in a world of constant change, libraries are a constant place where people can go to get information, to learn things, to ask questions, to be themselves. And that in itself is not only radical, but also an important, I think, consideration when it comes to book bannings and like attempts at censorship of intellectual freedom, and, you know, those conversations about setting rules and guidelines about what people can and cannot read. Is you can always go to that. If this book is no longer available at your school library, I mean, you said it earlier, guaranteed there's going to be like 100-person minimum wait list at your public library, because people are like, what is it about this book that is so objectionable? So even as materials are being banned, there's talk about things that are being banned, public libraries are always going to be that space where you can go and find that information.
We hope. Yeah. I think in Canada we have more safety and more legislature,
right,
and more desire even to keep and to defend these places. But there is a universality to public libraries, because we have people who come, it is their first time, they're tourists, they've just moved here, they're newcomers, come to the library because where they are from, the library was the place where they had a question answered. Regardless of what the Google may or may not tell you when you search it, the library is the place that they trust to access the information that they need at a really basic level. Removing books, removing reader's advisory, removing all of those things just for information.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something so valuable in having a place that can help you navigate to access the information that you need, whatever that information is, and defending that and defending what that means and fighting for that to continue. One of the things that I hear very frequently is that my job, AI, will replace my job.
Oh, girl, AI cannot replace your job.
No, because there's a lot of things that it couldn't, but it is something no one's reading anymore. There's a presumption that no one's reading anymore.
Yeah.
And so, like, who needs books anyway, and who needs access?
Physical books are a thing of the past,
yes,
people.
Exactly. And it's like, well, actually, I mean, have you checked out Book Talk recently? Like, I'm pretty sure that the spice and the smut and all of the other things,
Smut will never die.
Smut will never die. And kudos to them for, like, honestly, kudos to Book Talk for, like, turning lots of stuff around. And for normalizing, like,
this is now a Book Talk appreciation. We got to get the Hardy Boys into Book Talk. We'll figure that out. I'll come up with a strategy.
Hardy Boys into Book Talk. Oh, I could think of some.
Okay, all right. We are going to take that conversation offline.
Yes, indeed. Excellent. Yeah, so having a place where knowledge is accessible and where these things are still free, and where you can still access free things, it's something worth defending.
Absolutely.
But it also, like, the time may come when choices have to be made. And I desperately and optimistically hope that people will appreciate not having to spend $30 on a book that they don't know that they want and want to test it out first, or that they will want to be library super users and borrow the maximum amount of books at a time and have access to all of the things that that entails.
So I'm just intellectual freedom and freedom to read, and like these are all really, I mean, as we've learned, really big and really heavy topics. And I feel like there is, as there is with any universal big heavy topic, people want a way to take action, something that they can do. Like, I feel like when I give lots of conference presentations, and I kind of, as I'm doing with this podcast, I use the Hardy Boys as a jumping off point to explore, what happened with those books in the late 50s and early 60s, and how people didn't really know that those changes were made and what kind of a precedent that sets for historic children's literature. And I feel like that is a way that I am contributing to the conversation, and I'm helping bring awareness to this facet of an industry that I feel like there's very little public understanding of all of the intricacies of the publishing industry. And that's its own separate conversation, because the intricacies of the publishing industry are vast and deep and intricate as hell.
Yeah.
And it's not something that, everyone should expect to understand or even have any semblance of knowledge about. But, when it comes to conversations around book banning and challenges to access to information and access to intellectual freedom, like I don't being able to do the thing, from your perspective, from your role, from your experience, what are steps that people can take to work to protect that outside of, I guess, paying their taxes and supporting public libraries?
Well, I mean, it's when you vote, you definitely kind of contribute with your ballot for
Absolutely.
what you're voting for. And there is a certain amount of like preaching to the choir that this podcast might have, which is totally fine. But when you're voting, you actively get to kind of determine, which I think is really important. But the other thing is that when a book ban happens, to respond to that, to engage with that. And that engagement can be as simple as like, put that book on hold at your public library. Show your public library that you value that item.
Well, sorry, I mean, I don't want to talk over you, but my understanding is that when there is like a massive influx of interest in a specific book, the library will actually acquire more copies of that book to meet with the demand.
Sometimes that happens.
Putting these books on hold actually means bringing more of them into circulation, which is, a small action, radical result.
Yes, absolutely. Because sometimes it does, depending on how many we have or what's going on, it can absolutely generate purchase requests. The caveat of that being, the pool of money that we have for collections has to be split amongst everything we're buying. Though there is someone's job who it is to kind of like navigate that and ensure that that's not skewing too heavily.
Totally.
But yes, you can actually vote and there is a potential dollar amount attached to the hold that you're placing. And so that's a tiny thing. Even if you have no interest in reading the book, even just putting it on hold, and then when the hold comes up, just like let it expire or cancel it or whatever it is, so that you're indicating to your library that this is important. Something else is like genuinely walking in and like having a conversation with the people on the desk and saying like, hey, I heard this thing is going on. Do you want to tell me about it? Or how do you feel about it? And like, sometimes we can't tell you our candid opinion because we have talking points that we're supposed to use.
Well, and you're on the clock and representing an organization, and there's restrictions that come with that.
Yes.
But I mean, starting the conversation is important too, because I'm not going to say there's ways around talking points, but there's ways around talking points.
Yes, but more if the person who comes to the desk says like, hey, I know this thing is going on. This must be really tough for you guys to navigate. I really appreciate the work that you do and the value of your job.
Oh, that means so much.
It means so much. Like, it is such a simple, it costs you almost nothing to do. It could make someone's day.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like such a tiny little thing that goes a huge way towards impacting that person of just like, okay, I am struggling with it, because we do struggle with it all the time, and we have a party line that we have to hold. And so when someone comes in and unbidden says, hey, I see that you could be struggling with this. I support you. I support what you're doing. I don't support what's going on. That's huge. If you want more, then I would say like letter writing, sending your MP. There's a ton of websites that will do form letters on like cause stuff. And so like a form letter to your MP or your MLA about like, I don't agree. I think you're wrong because.
Well, and putting your opinion out there is important too. Like when you mentioned, talking to library staff, which, okay, library staff are the coolest people you will ever meet. Always talk to them. But they take that information back. Like I remember I'd have conversations that then I would, I could put that information into a customer comment forum.
Yep.
Or I would sidle up to my community librarian's desk and be like, hey, I just had this great conversation with someone. Like when you have those conversations, that information makes its way up the chain of command. And the more of those conversations that are had, the more of the feedback that is collected, the greater collective response that can come alongside that.
Yeah. It can make a really big impact. Commenting on social media pages, on your local library, when they are posting things about this book has been banned or this is happening or this, like those comments on social media, like all of those things, all of these pieces, it just helps to show that like there is actually support. There is actually people are not happy with this, with what's happening. And then things like specifically, if you are a parent at a school that is looking to ban or has an opportunity for you to volunteer, and that is something that you could take on and you can do to be that advocate to say like, well, actually, while I don't want my kid to read this, I don't want to take it away from other families to decide. Yeah. And so having that conversation and being that person who's willing to say, actually, I'm okay with my kid reading that, and I'm not okay with you deciding it for me. And just kind of, like, it can be tricky and ostracizing, but it's also like, if you don't stand up for it, who will? And there's lots of different ways you can, depending on your comfort level. But I would say those would be my call to actions of ways that you can engage.
I feel so inspired because I think I talked about this at the end of the last episode that you were on, because you inspire the hell out of me. There's like these big conversations can feel so heavy, and there's a way to take that down a notch and think about the different, like the small steps.
Yeah.
Radical impact.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel. Like we've spent all this time talking about book banning and intellectual freedom and what it means and what processes look like at public libraries, at school libraries, and the difference. There's no one way to ban a book. There's no one way to unban a book.
Yeah.
But there's also so much that goes on. And there's so many different steps and different conversations and so many different ways to get involved and ways to expand your knowledge and ways to learn about the process and to think critically about the world around you and the information that you're being given. And I could just go on and 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 on because there is so much. And I'm just so grateful that we were able to take some time today and really break that down. It feels the world always feels like a slightly better place after we have a conversation.
Oh, well, that's good.
And I think that's part of that inspiration piece, though, is I feel like these conversations give us power because it reminds us that,
that we have all the power.
Well, maybe not all the power, but we do, in a sense. We do have all the power.
Yeah.
And it's, showing us the different ways that we can use it.
Yeah. Because there is a lot of success to be had. And sometimes it's just how far we want to take it and how many shenanigans we want to get into.
All the shenanigans. And this is, I have to tie this back to the Hardy Boys because I've spent a lot of time in my career studying, talking about the Hardy Boys, coming from a place of deficit and feeling like I have to justify why the Hardy Boys, why should people care? Like, as with the automatic assumption, because I've faced a lot of it, full disclosure, of people being like, oh, well, it's just a children's series. Who cares? Why does it matter? And this is exactly why it matters, because where else do you start these conversations? How else do you, break down such incredibly difficult, high-level topics in ways that we understand?
Yeah.
And
And how do you teach the next generation to do the same thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like if there's one, there are many glorious things about the Hardy Boys, but this legacy that they're leaving is one of all of these things we've talked about. It's about critical thinking. Absolutely. It's about standing up for what's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, getting out there and taking action in the ways that you are comfortable doing so. The Hardy Boys, I feel like I need to add a disclaimer. The Hardy Boys do a lot of things that would definitely get you landed in jail. Please don't do those. But there are the liberties that they take, sometimes insane. But they're out there and they're doing the things that they feel are right.
Yeah.
And there's value to that. They're out here doing the things. God, I love this. Amazing. Okay, well, Ariel, I've said it before. I will say it again. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you for defending. Thank you for being a defender. I'm imagining Ariel with her flag and, knight in shining armor vibes, ready to go to battle for us. But that's what you do on a daily basis. You put on your cardigan, you you check out your Libraries Are Radical poster, and you're out there fighting for us every day. And we're just so grateful for you. So thank you. Thank you for expanding your radicalness to all of us.
It has been a pleasure. And thank you for having me.
Of course. Hopefully we will see you again.
Hopefully.
Friends, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been such fun chatting with the incomparable Ariel Kleber, and I want to take a moment to thank her again for her time, energy, and expertise. And until next time, this is Kyra Drogue, host of Sleuth Studies, the Hardy Boys podcast, signing off. The absolutely stunning original theme music you've just enjoyed was composed by Jeff Lee. Sleuth Studies is grateful for the support of Volunteer Alberta, the Canadian Red Cross, the GLOCAL Foundation of Canada, and the Government of Canada. For more information about Sleuth Studies, the Hardy Boys podcast, please visit www.sleuthstudies.ca or find us on social media @sleuthstudies.